welcome to Canberra Metalheads. This is a very special episode. This opportunity came up and I was like, hey, why wouldn't you take this amazing chance to get someone on the show which we wouldn't normally be able to chat to? Welcome to the show. You know me, Marky Worthington. And we've got Joel from Witchskull, and also join here with yourself. Introduce yourself, mate.
Oh, okay. My name's Dan. Dan Hawcroft. Yeah. I was a roadie for many years.
Yep. Yeah, roadie for?
It's a Motörhead, primarily, for about 8 years. Did a lot of stuff with Nick Oliveri as well.
Yep.
And a lot of UK bands that most people have probably never heard of.
Well, I mean, what a fucking dodgy intro there. Just throw it over to you to introduce yourself. What sort of host am I? Just like, all right, well, I'll sit back and you just run the show from here. It seems like you've got it sorted. But no, thanks heaps for being on the show, mate. And speaking of Nick Oliveri, we had him on the show as well. So when he came through here with his side project with the...
Mondo Generator.
That's right. Yeah, he came through Canberra, interviewed him in the green room at the basement, and it was one of the episodes that got pulled from the radio because he said, I love a venue that can keep you full of piss. And they were like, you can't promote drinking on the radio, so we had to pull it. But yeah, that was good, man. It was... good time to get people on the show and get people like yourself, man. I'll tell people at home how this came about. So
fucking random.
Quick shout out to one of my buddies. So I go to I'll give him a shout out, Market Meats in Belconnen. They're really good. There you go, Bede, and you've paid for. He gives me 10% discount next time I shop now. Seniors discount because I gave him that. No, just joking. There's no financial back end. I didn't even get a fucking lamb chop out of this. Anyways, no. So he said to me, he's like, the people at home just fucking nearly puked because of motion sickness because that camera nearly slipped off the table. Hey, don't watch this hungover, people. You'll fucking fall off your chair.
We should have done the Star Trek thing. Oh!
Yeah, exactly. The magic of editing. Yeah. So anyway, he said to me, "You're on a metal podcast. You might want to speak to one of my regulars here. Speak to Dan and see if he wanted to do the podcast. He runs a." He did an episode and he's got a book coming out with called God's PA, and I was like, holy shit, I've listened to that before this because Jamie Joster from Hatebreed in his podcast gave it a shout out. So I downloaded the episode back when it came. It was like I heard it around 2018. It might have come out around then.
Yeah.
Listened to the episode and I was like, man, this is really cool that, like, you know, you hear a bit of behind the scenes. A lot of people want to speak to the band members, and a lot of the time the best person to talk about the whole scenario would be the people behind the band. Yeah, so that was really good there. So shout out for Bede for hooking me up and getting it to this far, man.
Yeah, totally. Like it's random, right? So I think originally, like, and it sounds crazy to say, but I've lost a lot of weight doing a keto diet, and so I go and see Bede every fucking week in, week out, and buy the same bag of meat that I've bought now for about 3 years. Right? Yeah, it's the same shopping list, and every time I go in there, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just have that, and I think, and it's the same shit I buy, right? He could just fucking put it together. But yeah, huge shout out to Bede.
Yeah, he's good, man. I had dinner with him the other night. We went out to a restaurant, the Steakhouse, and he's looking at the cuts on the wall, and he's like, they fucked that up. Like they're telling him the things. I said, this is the thing about going out with a butcher. He'll be like, this is a class 6, not a class 9 Wagyu. What are you fucking charging me for this shit? Yeah, but he's so polite and quiet that he wouldn't sort of say that, but he'll like say it to you just to let you know that like he knows, but he won't tell the waiter, you know what I mean? It's
a delight. On the keto, because my whole family's been on it for a while, and I've only really just kind of gone off it, but my man like lost 17 kilos or something. He's like 80.
Yeah.
And now it's unbelievable how quick once you get into that whole process.
Oh, totally, right? Like, I'm such a creature of habit, right? And we'll probably touch on that in a bit, but like, but I think like for me, I've gone through this real fucking process of swapping out my bad habits for good habits, right? And it's made me realize that I'm just a creature of habit, but they were all bad at one point.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so I've slowly tried to fucking swap them out, and one of them was my diet. And so I think overall, from my heaviest to what I'm at now, I've lost 42 kilos.
Holy shit, that's amazing.
Because I was, like by the time I stopped touring and like, I was a fucking wreck.
Yeah.
Like an absolute wreck. Like,
Well, it must be hard keeping it, staying healthy when you're on the road. It must be one of the hardest.
Oh, it's fucking impossible.
Yeah.
Right? And it's, even we obviously, like, with Motörhead, we travel with caterers and all of these things. So you're set up to be able to do it, but it still doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
Like, because other things come and kind of invade. And like I said,
you mentioned this in your podcast, God's PA. I'm going to keep saying that over and over again.
Yeah,
so many times I actually thought of all the multiple meanings of God's PA. You know what I mean? Like, because I'm thinking of PA like at a gig, the public announcement system, and then personal assistant, and like there's so many cool double meanings for that name. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
But you were saying about like when you got off tour, it was like fuck. Like sometimes you think to yourself, did that happen? Like, some of those stories, like, was that real? Like, it seems like such a distant memory.
Oh, completely. You're absolutely right. And I think like the life that I have now, like, as much as it's, like, it's pretty fucking mundane. Like, I don't really, I think back to it, it's almost like a little bit of a blur, like a little bit of a dream or a little bit of a flashback, and some of them is actual flashbacks. But yeah, you kind of
That's
like
your Vietnam.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Totally. That's mate, you summed it up perfectly. It was my fucking Vietnam. But like, yeah, you kind of think back to it now, and you just go, you know what, like, and I bite my tongue on a lot of stuff, right? Like, I think, because in general conversation, like, it's basically an exchange of stories, isn't it, most of the time? And like, somebody will say something, I'll be like, blah, blah, blah. And in my head, I'll be like, I'm not even going to fucking bother talking about that. And I stop myself from talking about stuff, because half the time, people will either go, that's pure fucking bullshit. Or they'll just be like, yeah, you're just tooting your own horn.
Yeah, well, I mean? How did you, why Australia? Why out of all the spots to retire after? Why? Like, I'm not saying it's a bad choice. I'm just saying what
fucking retired.
I am.
So random stuff.
Must have paid well.
Yeah, totally. Randomly, I kind of, not kind of. My missus is Australian.
Oh, right, cool.
So I met my missus through a guy called Ed Bonin, Ed the Duck, who was a fellow tour manager. He's now a tour bus driver.
Yep.
So he's living the easy life. And then, we met. So he was originally, I think when we met, he was working with Megadeth. But prior to that, he worked with a UK punk band, and this is how insidious the UK punk scene is. He was living with a very small punk band who were on Fat Records called Goober Patrol.
Okay.
And we used to stay at their house. And I met my missus through there. She's originally from Wagga, moved to the UK when her parents split up and got divorced. And then when we had our daughter, we wanted our daughter to go to school in Australia. So made the move out here. But I came here in 2012, originally on the Soundwave tour with the Killswitch Engage guys.
Awesome.
I
was here for that. I seen Lamb of God and Killswitch.
Right.
Oh no, Lamb of God and In Flames, Black Dahlia Murder here in Canberra 2012.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Sidewave at the university.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So we did...
Randy threw a water bottle at my brother's head.
Yeah, and we came back as well with Times of Grace as well.
Okay.
Yeah, which was Adam, Jesse, and it was before Jesse had rejoined Killswitch, and it was... and
awesome.
So we came out and we hit up everywhere, really, and I just fell in love with the place. Like, I love it.
Why Canberra? Like, if your missus was from Wagga, did she know Canberra?
No disrespect to any of your Wagga listeners, but I am not going to fucking live in Wagga.
I do have one listener in Wagga. Oh, Dane, he doesn't mean it.
Yeah, sorry, mate. No, honestly, right? Thirsty Crow Brewery, great place. Love it, right? Been there, smashed it. It's but it's in terms of opportunities and what I wanted to do and stuff like that, I needed to be somewhere quite big. And also, she also has some other family that lived out at Gugong, and stuff. And so they had a little farm there. So when we first got here, we literally arrived here with nothing. Like, we lived at the farm at Gugong for a while and slowly built ourselves up. But that's why Canberra.
That's why Canberra.
It's a great place. I like it.
Yeah. Why? What got you into managing? Like you mentioned on the previous podcast I listened to with yourself, where you're like, I remember seeing Lemmy and Young Ones when you were watching TV when you're a kid, and then what takes you from watching Lemmy on TV to managing him from 2005 to 2011, did you say?
Yeah. 2005 was my first tour, kind of, 2011, midway on. So, yeah, late 2011, yeah.
I just checked my notes, I got that right. See some of this works.
Good work.
Maybe you made a right choice by choosing the Australian education system.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey? I thought I'd do the opposite. I thought after
Yeah.
you saying it's good and then you hearing me read out loud, you'd be like, fuck, we're going back somewhere else. Maybe Wagga would be better after all, less kids, more focus on each individual student.
Yeah,
but anyway, so what was the process to get you from where you were to personal assistant to Lemmy?
failing at school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Opportunity.
Yeah.
Is that a callback to what I just said?
Yeah,
I don't know. Bloody hell, what is-
Yeah,
I'm meant to be the comedian. What's going on?
That's right. You're a prime poster boy for the Australian education system. I'm a prime
more of a
poster boy
poster
for the
boy for-
failure of the UK education system.
I'm more of a poster boy for comedy in this room.
It was through a band called Capdown, really.
Yep.
Which was, it was called Skardcore, which is a very niche market, right? So it was a mix of like hardcore, like genuine, like old school Youth of Today, Gorilla Biscuits type hardcore, and like ska punk stuff, like Operation Ivy and bands like that, right? And they'd meshed it really, really well. And I'd been meddling around with my own bands and stuff like that, but like I always enjoyed rehearsals far more than playing live.
Sure.
Right? I'm quite an anxious cat, really. Like I'm quite introverted. I hate people fucking like being on stage, people looking at me and shit like that, right? Which is why I've always kind of thrived being behind the scenes.
Sure.
Like even now in the role that I do now, I'm very much a logistics person, and I'm very much I like to facilitate shit and then sit back and watch and go, oh, that went well.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so I was putting on gigs, lying to a venue about my age, and started putting on gigs, and and put them on, and a few times, and we became really, really good friends. Like at the time, like we had a huge mutual love of weed.
Yeah.
And very in-depth love of weed, of like different strains and different.
Take that
different
radio
strains.
station, you fucks.
Yeah, right.
No.
Yeah.
No, actually, they got me to where I am, but
Never
mind.
And yeah, so we were actually genuinely bonded on that, and a love of like old school hardcore as well,
Sure.
right? And so at that time, it was growing up in the northeast of England, they were from the Midlands. And they were blowing up. Their first album, Civil Disobedience, went like kind of blew up the UK punk scene. Like,
Yeah.
And unintentionally and almost unaware of what they'd created.
Sure.
So they were doing like within that album, they were doing, ska punk better than ska punk bands that were trying the hardest, right? They were doing hardcore better than the hardcore kids who were all like really loving it and really going for it and all posy-core, but they were doing it better without even thinking about that. They were doing like old school punk stuff, right? They were doing like drum and bass, bits of reggae and stuff like that they were pulling all these influences and then mashed it all into one album, and it just blew up, and it was almost like with ease. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Frustratingly with ease as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Like, there's a lot of bands who were like, fuck. But
It's like people saying that Motörhead is like the best, like without realizing it, they've fucking thrown it over all the punk bands by being more punk than punk bands.
Yeah, you're absolutely
Yeah,
right. It's a similar sort of situation, right?
Yeah.
Where they'd like, they'd written all the songs and they didn't know how good they were.
Yeah.
Right?
What
And
year is this around?
98, 99,
Yeah.
something like that. And then I put them on, and obviously with that, and also pairing it with them like a huge fucking work ethic. Like they were, I think this 1 year was like, and this is on like £50 a night, so the equivalent of what, 75, 80 bucks a night they were on, and they did something like 258 shows in 1 year, and they just, and they're all support shows. It's not headline shows. They're like,
That's a serious
yeah,
amount of touring.
and they're in like a shitty old van, and they'd like tour, just bang, bang, bang. And I put them on, and they were like, do you know what? You should come on tour with us. And I literally fucking packed a bag and left that night.
Yeah,
And
right.
I didn't speak to my parents probably for the next 10 years. Like,
Yeah, right.
I think my mum and dad went, well, in full transparency, the next time I actually got in touch with them was to say that you're going to be grandparents.
Oh shit.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
And like, so I went off, toured with them for a long time, and worked my way up from driving the van to helping sell a bit of merch, to then being a guitar roadie, to then like being a tour manager, to then like them going from basically being in this crappy old van to being on nightliner tour buses and doing full European tours. So you learn your skills every set of the way, right? And then, and tell me if I'm rambling, Matt. I have a tendency to fucking ramble on.
Dude,
but, like,
go for it. I've never seen a car with a handbrake off going down the hill, and actually enjoyed watching it so much as you talking, man.
Thanks, that's my life, right?
I'm just sitting
I
there
am
going,
nothing if not a cautionary tale, right? Like,
just like the car, at least it's going to be a good story at the end of it.
Right? And
good stuff.
So the singer Jake, he announced, he basically called everybody into and I remember it fucking vividly. It was in Wolverhampton Civic Wolfram Hall.
Yep.
And he called everybody. He was like, "Oh, I need to have a meeting with everybody." And everybody was like, "Oh fuck, what's this?" Right? Because they weren't the sort of band to have meetings, right?
Punk band doesn't do that.
Totally, right? They were the sort of band who would combine their per diems to maybe buy some weed, and that's what the meeting would be about. But like, not like, oh, we need to have a meeting.
6p short.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what the meeting was about.
Totally, and announced that he was going to be a dad. And was like, look, I'm going to be a dad. Like, I'm going to have to wind this down. Like, da 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 da. And and everybody had to kind of deal with it. Everyone's, you go, you're 50% stoked, 50% like, well, fuck, what's next, right? Yeah. And the next thing for me was a band called Kasabian. So and they're huge in the UK. I don't know if they're particularly big over here.
I know they were big over there.
Yeah, they were fucking huge, right?
They made a mark here, but
yeah.
They were massive.
That's how the Australian music scene works. We just know where
stuff's doing well.
Where something's going well. We just look at it and say, well, it's good to hear that you're doing well in X amount of countries.
Yeah, totally.
We just sit back. It's just like you were saying with your organising. We, the Australian metal scene, just like to sit back and know that people are doing well somewhere else.
So yeah, like that was, and the thing is, it was so. Do you know what? It sounds really harsh, but like it was a shitty time, but very good for my resume.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
And it was a shitty time because they weren't the big band that everybody thinks of at that time.
Yeah.
They were. It was almost like a step back to the band, to the. We were in a van, right?
Yeah.
So we're traveling around. We're doing all these shows with Cooper Temple Claws, and I was with them for a little while, and they were my first experience of bad management. Right, and which unfortunately is fucking prevalent in the music industry. Like,
sure,
it's everywhere, right? Like,
the Anvil story. Did you watch that documentary?
Yeah.
Those poor guys like getting fucked. Like they go through Europe and they're just like trying to pay them with goulash and shit.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
right?
give them food.
Yeah.
It's so funny to see that clip of most metalheads have probably seen this, but my favorite part from that show, talking about bad management, is just where Lips is just like, I don't want fucking goulash, I want money. You know what I mean? Some Eastern European dude trying to say he's got a free meal.
Man, do you remember Mad Dog and Cut Loose from that movie?
Yeah,
I went out on the beers with them one night.
Oh shit, they were meant to come here
hectic
to Australia, but they canned the tour. I actually heard recently someone sum it up. It's from the comedy scene, but it's transferable to the music scene. Australia is just where you go to keep your Australian fans happy, and if you can break even and keep your fans, then it's good. If you're a UK or American band, that unless you're like, doing sold out festival like the recent Not Fest and stuff, pretty much unless it's at that scale, to come over from another country to Australia is not financially viable for a lot of bands.
Yeah, true.
So the ones that do come out, that's why everyone should like support them, because they're like, we know what you're going through to get here and put on this show for us.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's a huge financial commitment, right? So, and from flights to immigration and all of these things that Joe Public don't see, the amount of like work that has to go in just to getting visas to tour in Australia was crazy. And then you've got all your equipment here, and then the logistics of the huge land distance between major cities, right? Like
it's
when we were
flights.
doing Soundwave, it's all flights, right? We would come off stage, all the gear would be packed up, and you'd put it there, and somehow it would magically be there at the next show, right?
Yeah.
Fuck knows how it got there. It was probably all freighted to an airport, and it did all this stuff, right? But that, I think Soundwave is a prime example, right? I think financially they ended up just being fucked. Right?
Yeah.
And that's clearly, I don't think it was intentional in any way. I don't really know the huge background behind it, but other than it's
I think he trod on a lot of toes.
He did, yeah. So sometimes you have, like you said, bad management, but also some people are just bad at communication and maintaining relationships.
Yeah, totally right.
Yeah.
I think he tried to. It was a bit of big noting, wasn't it? He tried to get Metallica, and they'd only just been here.
Yeah.
He offered them $1 million a show for 7 shows or something, so they went, all right.
Yeah.
But there's no need to drop an extra 7 mil.
That's it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes people just will sell stories to get people over here, and then in turn tread on toes, you know.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that just happens to be the way of it.
And
I think
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
There is that stratification of levels, though, right?
Yeah.
There's the bands that come here of like, yay, fuck, we're going to Australia, and it's a completely, this is how much money we're going to lose doing it, and they take that on the chin, and they understand that, and they're like, yeah, that's fine, we'll do it. No, it's not fine, but they're like, we've almost factored that into our costs for the year, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll make some money back on merch and blah, 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 blah. Like for me, I've always been one of those things that, like, no matter what show it is, I try and buy something from the merch, right? Because that's what fucking helps these days, right? Unfortunately.
Yeah, my missus is running out of shirts. She's got too many shirts to sleep in.
Yeah.
Because I'll just get two at every like, and the thing is, there's none in her size, so it's like two larges or two XLs.
Yeah.
So it's like, one that I can wear out in public, and one that you only want to wear to bed because it's too big for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
totally
like,
right. Yeah.
she's like, like 14 shirts to wear to bed tonight. You know, because I'm just always buying merch and being like, here you go. You know, take this.
Yeah,
you know, because I'm support. This is my way of supporting.
Yeah. So when I did uni, my dissertation that I did was on live streaming and downloads and its effects on the live music industry.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Okay.
And basically, you can sum it up, and I did a full fucking dissertation, but you can sum it up with buy some fucking merch.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's basically because bands now are struggling. They're constantly on tour because they're having to make this money that they're now not getting from record sales, which means that they only have a finite amount of time because they can't afford to go into the studio to write new songs, to create new albums, and it has this huge knock-on effect, right?
Fuck yeah.
But basically, buy some fucking merch.
And Motörhead had a mad range of merch, or has a mad range of merch. How did you find like coordinating that with gigs and things like that?
So I think when I was with them, a lot of it was handled by a third party, Bravado.
Okay.
I'm not sure who runs them these days. I know they did some stuff with EMP merch.
Yeah, I don't see
like
Lemmy fucking boxing up shit and posting it out to people.
No. But it was. Do you know what? He did have a huge fucking oversight on it. Part of my role was taking things to him and saying, this has been suggested. What do you think?
Cool.
Right? And a lot of the time, he'd have some very blunt feedback on it.
Like, tell us something about like a story of that. Have you ever had any just things you thought were great ideas and he's just gone like and shot it out of the air?
Do you know what? Without wanting to fucking sound thingy, like a lot of the time, me and him are on the same page.
Good.
Like,
excellent.
Which is why we work quite well together, right? I think, and it's something that I've touched on in the book. Really, is like this: the Motörhead crew was very, very well handpicked. All right.
Yeah.
In the way that, for example, there was Eddie Rocher, who was very business minded. He obviously cared about everybody, but he was very business minded, and he was very good at the logistics of that. I'm very much a left wing socialist, right? I'm a people person. Like I love people to be happy, and I love all of these things like that, and I love to take care of logistics as well as feelings, right? Which sounds really fucking fluffy, but it's true. But when you mesh that together, you get that
punk rock.
Yeah, exactly. Right? You get that kind of holistic picture, right? Where and so there'd be times where I'd bring, I think I'm trying to think of a good example. Right, the merch company wanted to do like these little fucking statues of Lemmy, right? And they'd sell them and and it was him and his bass guitar and his microphone, and it was almost like, you get like you can go to like a comic book shop and you can get like a bust of Batman's head or stuff like that, right? And we took one to him and he looked at it and he was a bit like, Ugh. I'm like, oh, because his first thing would be that he always ask me, oh, what do you think about it? And I'd be like, to be honest, mate, I kind of think you're that anti-statue, like, nobody wants that, right? And he completely agreed. And then another time there was some kind of it was a Motörhead shirt and it was a white shirt and he was like, Motörhead shirts don't come in white, rock and roll shirts don't come in white. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, well, yeah, you're absolutely right. Do you know what I mean? And he was very much over that kind of, let's keep this Motörhead. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
The brand.
Yeah. And do you know what? Like, since his passing, unfortunately, you've seen that widen a little bit.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? A lot, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of things now where you sort of look and go, what are those little pop things?
Yeah.
But they have the big heads.
Yeah.
Yeah, all this shit. But there's even fucking stuff where, like, I get Instagram kind of fucking targeted ads all the time, and I got some the other day for Motörhead running shorts, right?
Yeah.
And I was just like, what the fuck? It's like, do you know what? Not only did Lemmy never fucking run anywhere, right? Yeah. Like I wouldn't have fucking trusted him to run a raffle, never mind a fucking race. You know what I mean? Like, and he was just like, and he comes up and it's like, yeah, built for speed, and all shit's like, wrong sort of speed, my friend. Like, these aren't fucking, do you know what I mean? Like, that's, yeah. And you see this shit and you just like,
built for speed.
Fuck me, like, it's, yeah.
They could have just at least made it more Motörhead and said built for speed, not heroin.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly, right?
Something
You know
like
what I
that.
mean? Yeah,
Something
yeah.
a little bit more Lemmy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
If you look at that the Motörhead England design, you think
it's iconic, right?
it's iconic, but how many bootlegs have there been of it? You know what I mean? I kind of often wondered how he would have felt about the fact that, well, it's great, but even the bootleg side of it, where just people
Loved them, yeah.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, I used to.
So
On tours, I'd go out and get one of everything from the.
I just got to plug the charger into this
Okay.
one.
Oh, good. So that means I can get a beer.
When I interviewed Nick Oliveri,
Yeah.
he'd just gotten off the flight to Australia.
Yeah.
So he's like midway through smoking a cigarette in the green room inside. Like
Yeah.
he's like, it'll be fine to smoke in here, won't it? And I'm like, I can't say no to Nick.
Yeah.
And he's just midway through the interview. He's like having a beer, and he just like. I'm literally sitting. Lucky I didn't film it. But I'm literally like, Nick. So how do you find Australia, mate? And he's just. Yeah, good. Just kept in character.
Yeah. Such a legend.
Yeah, well, I was just like, fuck, that's awesome. And I got a guy backstage meet and greet as part of a competition I ran here, The guy that runs the promotion for that was like give away a meet and greet, like to promote the gig. And he was just expecting to go out and meet him. And he's like, do you want a beer or something, man? They end up like drinking and hanging out in the green room for like the rest of the night. Like from when they finished the gig until they went home, they let him hang out with the crew and shit.
I'll tell you, Nick is such a nice bloke, right? And I think when I started how I ended up working with Nick was actually supporting Motörhead, and he was the springboard for me ending up working for Motörhead, right? But I got offered the tour through a mate of mine who double booked, and I ended up working with Nick, but I was so fucking worried that first day because I'd heard so many bad reports about him. It was like, he's a fucking lunatic, he's a fucking nightmare, all this stuff. The nicest, genuinest, like fucking most amenable, most intelligent, like kind of interesting bloke I'd met in such a long time back then, right? To be able to just, blow out with him and chat about old hardcore music, to just fucking da-da-da-da-da. And he was good as gold, right? And I think a lot of those war stories that I'd heard about him had been completely fucking misconstrued.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, or we're in a place where I could see, he's almost like, and I openly admit it, if I'm backed into a corner, I get a bit fucking belligerent, right?
Right.
I think a lot of people do.
That happens.
And I think maybe he would been in that situation.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Where he's like, do you know what? I can fuck with this, so I will fuck with this. If you're going to push back at me, I'll push back at you.
Sure.
But when I encountered him on the journey of fucking life, as it were, like, he was such a nice laid back dude, and still is to this day, right? Dangerous to go out drinking with, but a very nice dude.
It's like that story about I forgot who it was with the I remember in the Lemmy doc, they're like, I went in to do some recording with Lemmy, brought in a bottle of Maker's Mark, and just handed it to me. And by the end of it, we drank so much, we didn't do any recording. I went to hospital, alcohol poisoning, and he just continued with his night. I was like, fucking hell. And then there's that one. I think one of the other people they interviewed said that were like, he's like, do you want a Jack? And he just thinking, I'll just give him this fifth of Jack and we'll just share it. So he takes a swig and hands it to his mate. And he looks over and Lem's opening up another Jack, and he means a whole bottle each instead of a swig from one bottle. just like so generous. There we go. Genuine and genuous. And I'm just like, why did I just make like 4 different fucking words? Like, I've never seen an English guy so happy to let the language just fall off the fucking face of the earth. Exactly. See, he's like, we gave this language to you fuckers. You can bring it out to Australia and turn it into this shit. But no, it just really. Hey, speaking of which, so you can. I've done interviews in the past, and sometimes the Mr. YouTube warrior gets behind the keyboard and says, like, this dickhead just interviewed himself for most of the time. This is probably one of the first times I've been able to be matched with my ability to talk. So it's really good to, like, a lot of bands...
I'm a complete verbose prick.
A lot of bands are quite quiet people, you know what I mean? So, like, it's good to get someone that's more on the publicist side of things to try and, like, be more of a talker, you know. So, but yeah, one of the people said that, and I was thinking to myself, yeah, fair enough. But I'm aware of it. It's the worst thing. Like, I can do something, and I'm like, I prefer sometimes to be completely blissfully ignorant. Like, I know that I talk too much, but I prefer to let people talk as well. So I'm like this mismatch of like too much of this and not enough of this, and I know what's happening the whole time. But that comes from like my comedy background and things. And one link to comedy and Motörhead is Jim Norton's Down and Dirty 2008. He put out this comedy special where Lemmy DJ'd it. So yeah, so if anyone hasn't seen this, if you're a fan of comedy and Motörhead, Jim Norton, who's a New York comedian, put out a comedy special with a bunch of different, it was a series. He had about 3 or 4 comedians per episode, and there's about 5 episodes. And he actually had Lemmy do the sound for the gig as a guest DJ.
Where was it?
This was at near Boston, I think, one of the rooms there. I don't remember. I don't know 100%. But he had guys like Jim Jeffries, Patrice O'Neill, Bill Burr, when they in 2008, before they blew up. And Jim Norton did the MC for it, and he was literally just throwing it to Lemmy. He's like, "Oh, take us away, Lemmy," and Lemmy'd be up there doing his thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, between. So it was called. It was called Down and Dirty. Yeah.
Okay.
That's
what, like him DJing tunes that
for
he
comedians.
Okay,
So he was doing.
He had a fucking eclectic music. Test, right?
Well, he used to put
crazy.
Yeah.
He used to put the music on to bring them out and play them off. He was just sitting there playing the house music.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, Jim was throwing it to Lemmy to do the sound, you know. And I don't actually know how much of that was also managed behind the scenes, whether he was a character there to do that, or whether. But knowing what you've said about Lemmy, I feel like he would have had a lot to do with it, you know. And I feel like
he was very controlling, and he was very, like, that sounds like a bad thing to say, very controlling, but very self-aware and very aware of how he is represented and very aware of controlling how he's interpreted, right?
Yeah.
Which is a really healthy thing for an artist. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah. But I'm not seeing that. I'd like to see that. But in my mind, as soon as you said him DJ, and I'm like, that'd be the worst fucking thing I could ever imagine.
He wasn't
He'd be
putting
like,
on.
Here's Tubers in the Moonlight by the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band. And he'd be like, what the fuck is this?
Well, that's actually a question that I had for the podcast. What sort of music did Lem listen to when he wasn't on tour? If he was just chilling, do you know what sort of music he'd like to put on? Yeah.
So me and him originally bonded over his music taste.
Yeah, like Little Richard and stuff was in the doco. Is that sort of thing?
You know, I love stuff like Little Richard. The Downliners Sect was one of his favourites, which is like a very small kind of like UK rock and roll band. He loved Skunk Anansie.
Yep.
He like one of his favourite bands, Evanescence. He really liked.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. He, he used to like say the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band, which I don't know if you've ever heard them, are fucking amazing. So basically, like. They're one of my favourite bands of all time now, and it was him who got me into them, right? And it was almost like every song was a different genre.
From what era?
From the 60s.
Yeah,
like,
right,
really fucking tripped out, fucking, like, they had a song called, like, My Brother Did the Noises for the Talkies. They had one that was Humanoid Boogie, which is about robots trying to dance like humans. Like, I don't like, You Done My Brain In. So many fucking My Pink Half of the Drain Pipe, which is about the detached houses that you see in the UK where, you know, people look after their own little section of garden to the point that they've even painted half of a drain pipe a colour that they wanted and shit like that. Like, really good fucking social commentary in terms of like that. And one of the guys went on to be in Monty Python. So he was originally in the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band, was called Neil Innes. Went on to be in the Ruttles, who was like, I don't know if you've ever seen that documentary. The Beatles documentary, with like Leggy Mountbatten. It's like, what do you like about them? It's like the trousers, like Dirk Nasty and stuff like that. It was so good.
He was a fan of Beatles as well.
Huge fan of the Beatles. Huge fan of the Beatles.
And I like what
he saw him at the Cavern, didn't he?
Yes,
That's pretty full on.
Yeah, so he once told me like one of his first ever fucking things was carrying the guitar around for Eddie Kidd as well. Was it not Eddie Kidd? Was it Eddie? Was it Johnny Kidd and the Pirates? Eddie Kidd was the motorcycle stuntman, might be Johnny Kidd in the past. But yeah, I think back then, he saw him at the cabin. And yeah, he's
Well, you look at his resume with that, and then working with Hendrix and
yeah.
some of the wildest. You know, you could just. That's all. I found reading the autobiography. Sort of, you just start getting into a story, and then it's over. Because it's like it needed 10 volumes in his life.
Totally.
So I sort of found that with the movie as well. It's just it's just touching on something you want to hear about, and then it's over because he's got to mention everything else he's done in his life.
True.
Yes. Totally. It was such a it's a really old fucking cliched adage, right? That what some people like, they can live 80 years and not live a day. Do you know what I mean? Right?
Yeah.
But then there's some people who can live fucking 20 years and fucking live and embrace every fucking minute.
I've followed him since a kid, and I remember watching a doco when he was 40, and he's saying, so when he's 40, I'm 15 or something, so it's like, I'm thinking 40's old, and he's going, I could die tomorrow, and I wouldn't care. I've had a hell of a life, and you believed it because you knew it.
Yeah,
and he had up to the age of 40, what he'd sort of crammed into that space of time.
Yeah, totally.
Was just,
but do you know what I did like? And I'm kind of fucking going off on a bit of a tangent here, but like when you're talking about the movie, do you mean the one that Wes Wachowski and Greg Oliver did, the recent one? Like the one, well, not recent now, it's like,
2011.
Yeah.
2011, okay,
yeah.
So
you're in it as well.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that towards the end, because it was towards the end of the doco that you had more parts. I know. I don't know if you compared it to like how they edited and all that sort of stuff. You're fairly early on, I think, just as a part of the crew. And then at the end, they've got a couple of good little like clips of you actually interviewing.
Yeah, so I had to be interviewed a few times for that, because I was in full fucking transparency a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
I think I was interviewed in Norway. That didn't make it there. I think I did one at the Rainbow. That might have fucking done it.
Rainbow wasn't in there, I don't think.
Yeah, so I was up in there.
Where were you based the whole time you were working with Lemmy? Were you in America, or were you doing?
In the UK, but I used to spend a lot of... So, weirdly, Motörhead used to tour for 11 months of the year, pretty much in and out, right? And then...
It's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? It's crazy. And then that 1 month of the year would be probably spent in the studio. So he would be busy 12 months of the year. So what I would do... For the first couple of tours, I stayed in the UK. I always had an address in the UK.
Yeah.
But at the end of a tour, I'd be like, do you want to come stay back in LA with me?
Yeah.
And I'd be like, yeah, all right then. Or I'd be like, no, I want to go home. And they always taught me into, like, what the fuck do you want to do that for? I'd be like, well... I want to see my missus. I can see you next month. I'm like, all right. And so
it's so funny to be on tour for 11 years and being like, for 11 months out of the year, and being like, why would you want to go home?
Yeah, I'll tell you, right? Yeah. And see, this is like, he had a completely like different mindset and a different reality, and it was so funny to and it goes back to what we were chatting about earlier about, like when the alarm, the changing the clocks. And
that's
things
a good
like
tour
that.
story.
Yeah. So like, on my first few days where he's basically, thinking that I'm trying to pull one over on him, and it was almost, I'd be doing his wake-up calls, and he'd be like, you've changed the fucking clocks, and da-da-da-da, right? And I'd be like, no, I haven't, look, it's down here. Well, you've changed that one as well. You've changed the one to the right. I'm like, I fucking haven't, right? It's such a different mindset. And so you'd be like, oh, well, I really want to go home. And he'd be like, well, why? And I'd be like, well, why wouldn't I?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, why the fuck wouldn't I? Like, I've been wearing the same old stinking jeans for like fucking 2 months, like all my.
And that's
fucking,
after they were in the bog in Norway.
Ah, yeah. Fuck, man.
I got a couple stories.
I fucking forgot, mate. You done your read.
Yeah. So I'll see if I can recount the story. You tell me if I'm right or not.
Oh, yeah.
This is what I remember of it. So in the van, it's early hours in the morning. You're still traveling. You're like, let's go out. I got to go out for a piss. It's middle of the night. It's in Norway. It's snowing as shit, and there's a pisser on the van. But for whatever reason, it was worth going outside for.
Yeah.
Gone outside, look down, feet are in a bog, your shoes are gone in a puddle of muck.
Yeah. It was like a babbling brook, like fucking
in the middle of nowhere.
I don't know if that's the sign for a babbling brook, but like there they go. It was.
I'll let you take it away from there. I got a good start on it though.
So so tour bus. We've got a full fucking like toilet in there and everything, and I don't even know. I don't even fucking really remember why. But I'm like, oh, pull over! I need to run for a piss. Pitch black, middle of fucking Norway. We'd just done a show at the Oslo Spectrum, and kind of run off, went into the thing, I'm like, going to run for a piss, and just went, it was almost like a fast flowing like river or babbling brook, and it just blew my shoes off. And I could just like, and I went back and I was like, oh fuck. And yeah, I got to the venue the next day and I literally had to like go find a skate shop, walk in there, told them the story, they thought it was fucking brilliant. Put them on the guest list for the show, like all this stuff, like yeah, it was mad, but yeah, I had some fucking good times on that tour.
Just the idea of you going in full like tour gear just with no shoes.
Yeah,
like
exactly
it's just
right,
so funny.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like yeah, no shoes, and yeah, it was mad, right? But I had some good times. That so I got fucking. I don't know if I've mentioned it previously, but I got fucking knocked myself clean out on that, and let me had to fucking like. So we were at this EMP merch party in I can't remember the fucking Slick Stug or somewhere like that, and I'd already got into fucking trouble that night, right? Am I right to talk about fucking drugs on this?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sweet. Right. So
better we talk about it.
I'd been,
I mean, you can do it.
Yeah.
If anyone does drugs because of Canberra Metalheads, you're a fucking sheep, dude. If someone says Marky made me do it, then how about you go buy some fucking merch as well while you're at it? You know, if you're taking my word for it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And so like it was this EMP merch party, and I was like hanging out with the German promoter, like what's his fucking name? I mean, him had fucked off into this like fucking cubicle at the start, and like we're doing coke in there, and this fucking security guard comes over the thing and he's like, I do not mind what you are doing, but this is the ladies' toilet. And I'm like, alright, fucking whatever. Like, so we both come out of there, red faced or whatever, and it turns out that it's a free bar, and I'm like, fucking brilliant, and do my usual thing of like, oh, amazing, I'm just going to drink loads and loads of tequila.
Yeah.
Alright? Because it gets you pissed really fucking quick. And I'm like, yeah, awesome, because like, I guess when you're running around doing all this logistics shit, you have a finite period where you're like, oh, cool, I can get smashed there, and then I'll be fine. But you don't think about that. Oh, I'll get smashed here, and I'll feel shit for the rest of the fucking thing.
Yeah.
And so, me and this guy, I nearly said his name though, we're smashing back fucking tequilas, and I'm like, yeah, blah. And by the end of the night, I'm staggering back to the fucking tour bus, and Lemmy's already on that, and he's like watching Family Guy, as he always fucking did on the bus. And I'm walking back, and he said, like, this next bit comes from Lemmy. I don't really remember the next bit. But he was like, yeah, I could see you coming back out the window, blah, 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 blah. He said that I stopped, was chatting to some guy, and said to the guy, like, oh, apparently fucking, like, you know, I said, oh, watch this, and just threw up all over this car. And apparently it was the guy's car, and just went like, "Das ist my auto," and all this, and I was just, right, and I just went, apparently just went, "Choose," and walked off, which is like, bye. Then came, staggered onto the bus, went, all right, Lem, and just fucking tripped over and just headbutted this fucking table and was out cold.
Oh, shit.
And, like,
that took a turn. I thought it would have been the bloke that owned the car that knocked you out.
Yeah, no. He was running scared. I was just like, huh? Right, and apparently I was like, choose, and ran off to the bus. Like, as soon as he said
if that was framed right, it'd be the perfect new quirky ad for Volvo.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
just a guy pukes on the car and says, bye,
totally,
and then it's just like, Volvo, drive your dream.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a laid back casual car that you're not even going to get bothered if anybody fucking spews on the hood of it, right?
It's the new ad for windscreen wiper rubbers because it just cleans it
totally,
like it's all done. Yeah.
Mate, you just reminded me of that fucking film. What was it, Crazy People? You ever seen that with Dudley Moore?
No.
Where he does like realistic adverts, and one of them's like Volvos. They're boxy, but they're good.
Yeah. Well, that's like the British humour that you're were saying about, like that style of humour. Like, from what I've picked up from interviews and things like that, Lem was a big fan of that style of comedy, which is why I think he might have been interested in doing that comedy gig that I spoke about before. He seems like
a lot of his friends were comedians.
Yeah,
like, so,
especially at the Rainbow, like, because I got a podcast I listened to by a guy called Dean Delray, and he used to book the Rainbow for years, and he talks about, you know, hanging out there and all that sort of stuff, and he's a massive comedy fan. He's an LA rocker that started doing comedy when he was 44, and he's in his 50s now, and he like tours and stuff like that. But he started doing music, and now he's doing comedy.
Yeah, nice.
And he even said he's just because he stopped partying hard. He said he went to a gig once, and there was like a pyramid of coke, and all the guys from Motley Crue and stuff were there. and he's just like, man, because an old LA rocker guy, he's just like, oh man, I had to fucking hook in or otherwise everyone else would get it. And he said, and I looked down and my fucking arms going numb, and I was like, fucking hell, I had too much. And I went over to the guy that was running the party. I said, you need to call an ambulance, man. I think I'm having a stroke. And he's like, the guys from Motley Crue here, we can't fucking have any heat. Hands him a bottle of fucking Stoli and says, sip on this until you come down. He's up in the bedroom rubbing his arm, sipping on the Stoli, hoping that it comes down. And then he comes down, he says, yeah, so, I don't party anymore. He stopped partying. He goes, and then I realised, I thought, fuck, if I knew Lemmy was going to make it to 70, I never would have stopped.
True, right? You know what I mean? Like, he had a good fucking innings, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of his friends were... a lot of like all British comedians as well, like, and ones you wouldn't think of, right? Unless you kind of know his backstory a bit more. Like, so I like I don't know if you've ever seen any of the comic strip presents stuff and things like that, right? With like Bad News.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so he was one of his like best friends was like Robbie Coltrane, which randomly is Hagrid from fucking Harry Potter, right?
Yeah.
And he used to come down to a lot of gigs and hang out, and it's because they'd worked together on, I think, on Eat the Rich and a few other bits and bobs. And
I've seen him play a cop in a show before. I'm just like,
Cracker.
fuck it, yeah, he does everything.
Yeah,
It's a gnarly big old cop,
Yeah. And he did like what, Nuns on the Run. I don't know if you've ever seen that one. It's fucking terrible film. And so he was like friends with them, and
so that would have been how he got the Young Ones thing. Like, how did that sort of work? Because the Young Ones was like early. It was about 80.
Yeah, so Young Ones, like, I grew up fucking loving the Young Ones, and I think it was probably being rerun when I first saw it. And I'm fucking too old.
Because it's funny when you look at that episode they were on Bambi. If you look at everyone from when they're doing University Challenge. And if you look at everyone in there, it's like it's Ben Elton, and it's like all of them are really mega
so
famous now.
There was Jules Holland in there. There was Ben Elton, and that was part of the comic strip. And I think they did the comic strip presents, which is, I don't know if you've ever seen Bad News and More Bad News.
All that stuff's
totally,
brilliant.
Right? Yeah. That's my favourite quote from that. Is it? What is it? Jimmy Page was 22 when he wrote Stairway to Heaven. He was like, I was 19 when I learned to play it. I think that says something.
Yeah. That's fucking brilliant.
So good. And it says sausages up there. It's so good. We used to say so many fucking like bad.
It was also in Californication as well. Them did that spot, that
in
scene
the rainbow, right?
in the rainbow.
I remember that. Yeah.
So it's like random cameos as well. Was really cool.
Yeah, he used to do quite a few of them, like a few bits and bobs, right? And he also did. And he's fucking huge. He used to piss him on. He was a huge bone of contention with him. He did a Walker's Crisps advert, which is like Smith's Crisps, right? Where they didn't pay him. But all he asked in return was he wanted a lifelong supply of salt and vinegar chips, right? And they never delivered. They never fucking delivered, because you can't get salt and vinegar in the States. Where he was living, he's like, oh fucking it, because both me and him, our favourite meal of all fucking time is a salt and vinegar chip sandwich. Right? And so we'd have one every fucking night on the bus, right?
Yeah.
And he'd be like, but then he'd go home or we'd tour the States, and he'd be like, oh fuck, I just want some salt and vinegar chips. I'd be like, yeah, me too. Right?
I heard the story about the hot chips, putting them in the microwave on the van.
Yeah.
So
and he used to do it with fish as well. Like, he'd fucking crank it up, and he'd like, I'd be like, look, it's a microwave, not an oven, right?
Yeah.
I'd be like, you don't need to put it in for fucking 50 minutes.
Yeah.
And he'd be stood there watching it like it's fucking, like he's watching the Dukes of Hazzard or something. It'd be like fucking, and it's just going around. It's like, dude, like the entire fucking bus is filling up with smoke and stinking like fucking haddock, and you're like, oh man.
It could only be described as a sea creature.
Oh, right, sea creature. That was with Camel, man. That fucking bus driver. That bus driver was so fucking funny. Like, I don't know if the preempt I was giving the guy a Mexican wake up as well, which we used to do to quite a few people. We had an acoustic guitar on the bus that I used to bring along. It ended up getting fucking smashed, which was annoying. But like, if anybody was pissing us off, we'd go to their bus and be like, knock, 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 really like middle of like 3 a.m, right? Like the worst hour you could pick. And we'd stand there and go, dun, 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 you cunt! And like walk off, right? Like, so we did that to him a couple of times. And then the next day we were driving there and our bus broke down, and me and Campbell were like, oh fuck it, let's go for a wander. And we ended up jumping over like the safety barrier of a motorway, and ended up in this little Italian village. And it had this like almost like a a supermarket, but like a little scaled down version. And in the freezers they had like octopus. I'm like, oh fuck it, let's get a couple of these. We can fuck with people, put them in their bunks and blah 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 blah. Like, so we got this, and then we got it on the bus, got back, and in all honesty, we completely fucking forgot all about it. Like, and a few days later, this thing's honking, right? And so it's this perfect storm of like, we've got this honking fucking octopus. The crew bus driver's really fucking pissing us off. Where we've got a few days off, and it was everything aligned like this fucking, like these planets of shit in a line, right? And basically what happened was we like knocked on the door, the guy opened it, and we just fucking tossed in this fucking like rotting octopus into his bus. Like, he was just stinking, like pure stinking. And he must have emailed the owner of the bus company saying like, oh, I want to quit this tour, like fuck these, like I want to leave them here, like blah, blah. And it used to happen quite a bit, right? We used to, I look back on it now, and the amount of letters that we get of people like, fuck this band, like we want to leave them here and blah blah blah. Like
added to the pile.
Yeah, exactly, right. And he'd emailed the guy, and he's like, I was awoken by what could only be described by being thrown at me, what could only be described as a rotting sea creature. He was just like, fuck. But yeah, but over the years, like bus drivers, and we either got on really fucking well with them. With there was people like Jonah and Ronaldo and Claire, and we used to fuck with them, but not in it, but in like a love way. And they could take it, right? Like Claire, I've got it covered over now, but I even got a tattoo on my back that said "fuck you, Claire," because he woke me up with a vacuum cleaner one morning. Right? And I was like, he woke me up, and I was like, man, I'm gonna go get a tattoo right now that says "fuck you, Claire," and I literally just went and got it and came back. Right? And his daughter loved it. It was the best thing ever. She was like, that's the best. But there was so we'd fuck with them from a place of love, but then there was drivers if you pissed off the crew, they would go out their way to fuck with you, right? With them. Yeah, like I think the best one that I ever had, and it was before my time, and it was Tim Butcher had told me, apparently they found there was a bus driver who was really fucking doing their head in, and they found outside a gig one night like a mannequin, and they snuck it on the bus, right, and they dressed it up in some of Tim's clothing, right, and while the bus is driving along, they tied a fucking rope around its neck and then tossed it out the roof skylight so that it hit the front windscreen while the guy was driving. And he thought he'd hit somebody, and the bus is fucking swerving everywhere. And apparently the guy never drove a band ever again. Like he quit.
Just
he quit and was like, I'm not fucking driving a band ever. He ended up delivering fucking like glass bottles of fizzy pop around Glasgow. Like he was just like, I'm never fucking driving a band ever again. He thought he'd like fucking kill someone because he had smashed this exploded man.
I remember a quote that I heard where it was basically like if you so there was a few things that Lem had like requirements for the bus. It needed to be cold. The aircon needed to be the Iceman, and it needed to be running all the time.
Yes. Yeah.
So even when it was sitting there parked, it was just it needed to be running. It used to help him sleep here in the engine or something.
That's
like
right.
that.
Yeah, that goes back to his Hawkwind days, right? Which was like, you didn't have plug-in power at venues, right? It's a pretty modern thing, and so is giving a fuck about the environment, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? Which is unfortunate, right? Because it's the world we live in. But like, for him, the noise of the bus and the slight vibration of the engine was the only way he could fall asleep.
Yeah, right.
It's the only way he could fall asleep. Like,
so if that turned off, he'd wake up, like, or whatever.
Oh yeah, you'd hear the dum 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 dum, and you knew someone was going to get showered up.
Yeah.
And he used to come out with some fucking classics, like to the drivers as well, right?
Like if it hit a pothole or a bump as well, that'd set him off. From
what
I heard.
Right?
Yeah.
The other thing that he could never get his head around as well, which used to crack me up, and like the drivers hated it, but so in the UK, you can only drive a certain amount of time, then you need to take a break, then you can drive it a little bit more, and then every couple of days you need to take 2 solid days off.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just like, you can just fucking, like in the States, it's like, you can give the driver a bit of cash and go, right, we're in LA, we've got to be in New York for the next gig, like here's some extra, just do
get
it. Loads of coffees, just get us there. Like you can't do that. They have tachographs in the UK.
Well, they do them here too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so he used to hear that the drivers would get a couple of days off because they'd be like, what the fuck? Because you'd have to, obviously in that, like you either get a double driver in or you plan the tours around it.
Yeah.
And I remember Jonah, like, him hitting a fucking bump on the way out of the venue, and he'd come stomping down going, "Fucking hell, Jonah, like, what have you been doing, spending the past couple of days reading a book on how to drive like a fucking cunt?" Do you know what I mean? But then he'd go back, and then an hour later come down and go, "Oh, John, how's it going?" Like, do you know what I mean? Just like, it was and that's what, to me, like, and I still carry that with me in life today, right, is you can explode and go fucking ballistic, and then everything's fine. Right?
Yeah.
Do you know
it's
what I mean?
out of the system. Then,
Yeah, it's out of
it?
the system, but and to me, it's a huge fucking feeling in my life now. Is that like people don't see that I don't give that much of a fuck that I carry it with me. Do you know what I mean? Like I can be like, "Fuck this," blah 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 blah. Anyway, like, what should we do there? Like,
Yeah.
And it's that weird ability to. And we used to have a saying as well, right? It's like the truck doors are closed. So during the gig, you could fucking fallen out with, like, the amount of times that I had arguments with people like fucking Tim Butcher or blah 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 blah, right? But as soon as the truck's packed, we're all friends.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
We're here now.
Yeah, we're all like there. Yeah, the gig's done, right?
I suppose you have to, otherwise it's all going to fall apart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally, right. Or you know, like, I'd have a.
You can't have a grudge though.
Yeah,
you can't
exactly,
be on
right.
tour
And
with
I think,
a grudge for
you hit the
someone.
nail on the head, right? And again, me being a fucking verbose prick, I could have just said we didn't have grudges.
Yeah.
Instead of chatting for about 5 minutes.
Well, it's like that. Jonah Hill has a joke. Jonah Hill? No, that's a fucking musician. Joan Rivers. There you go. See, I did your trick. I switched the name. Hey, was it Evil Knievel? No, he's a stunt rider. So Joan Rivers has this joke. She's like, "You're married with someone until the point where you can just look at the side of the head when they're eating, the temples are going in, and that's enough to piss you off."
Yeah.
Exactly,
right.
Because you're just looking at them going, "Of course your head's fucking moving, you can't."
Yeah, I'll tell you. But
But that's what a grudge will do, right?
Oh, totally.
Whereas you can just if you like can get it out in the open, then you've said it and it's done.
Yeah,
you know?
and it's, do you know what? In all honesty, like, I've toured with quite a lot of bands, and it was quite rare.
Yeah,
And it was quite rare to have that, because and people who were there at that, you know, if you had that, were there just for that flashpoint, you'd go, "Fuck me, this is a really toxic environment."
Yeah.
But the reality is it wasn't.
because
Right?
of that.
Because of that,
Yeah.
It was that ability to just almost like blow up and then laugh at yourself for blowing up.
Yeah.
And other people could laugh at you with it, right?
Yeah,
Like, so, and you know, there'd be times where on other tours where you could have had an argument with somebody, and they'd carry it over for fucking shows and shows and shows.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, what's up with you? "Oh, you know what? When we were in fucking Leeds, you blah 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 blah." I'm like, "Mate, that was like fucking 2 weeks ago." Like,
yeah. Sometimes you
fucking on
forget
about,
what you're
like-
mad about.
Yeah,
you have to
totally, right.
remind them.
Yeah, let go of it, man. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, so,
Especially for Motörhead too. Like, you look at a band like that, they were just on buses always. They never got to that stage where they were like Guns N' Roses and flying separate helicopters to each other.
No, we did have a fucking one. So there was two things that we did have. And yeah, you're absolutely right. For the majority of time, it would be, we had to have two buses. So there was a band bus, which was the band and me, and then there was a crew bus, which was all of the rest of the crew, and there was 2 trucks, right?
Yeah.
And we'd occasionally have 3 trucks when we had the bomber with us,
Yeah.
because the bomber was a huge fucking thing. But like,
It's the greatest stage prop of all time.
oh, totally, right? Yeah, it's so good, right? I got some, like, it would fucking, it runs from a joystick, which was fucking weird, right?
That's
so you just
awesome.
fucking fly that back like that.
You've done it.
Yeah, I fucked around with it. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
fuck,
yeah.
that'd be
So,
so
yeah,
awesome, man.
Yeah. So and like, I don't want to go off. You'll have to remind me what I was talking about a second ago. But like, but with the bomber, like, Stefan was a prime example of Motörhead crew in that he was so fucking proud to use the bomber, right?
Yeah.
It was his pride and joy, right? He'd be like, "Oh man, I'm getting the bomber out tomorrow, right?" Because only certain venues that you could use it, right? Because it's fucking huge. And he'd be like, "Oh, I'm so excited, we're getting the bomber out. We're getting the bomber. The bomber's going to be here, right?" And this is a guy who's done this like fucking 300 times.
Yeah.
But it was like, it was a new fucking like experience for him every time. And
Yeah,
that was a prime example
That's
of
the
Motörhead
best,
crew,
man.
right?
And that people have
Like,
that kind of love
he loved
for
it. But yeah, what was how we were traveling, right? There was times where we did occasionally get like, and it was more through the promoter. It certainly wasn't I was going, "Oh, let's be all extravagant and get a fucking jet." Like, it was. There was a time in France where we got a private jet. And there was a time, I can't remember where it was, where we got a helicopter, and me and Campbell said, "Never a fucking again." Like, I don't know, have you ever ridden in a helicopter?
No, I refuse to. They just look
it was
like...
the fucking worst.
That's what I was
Like, I would never go in one ever a fucking again. It was like being in Willy Wonka's fucking lift. Like, it was the worst, right? Like, honestly, right? Me and Campbell, like, got in, it was like, "Yeah, cool, da, 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 da," and it went off, right? And it took up, and I said to the guy, I was like, look, we're not super cool with this, like, take it easy. And I think he was like, and this was the other thing, right? Whenever you say, oh, yeah, we're Motörhead, they're almost like, oh, cool, I can act like a fucking cunt, right?
Yeah.
This thing took up and literally just dropped the nose and went forward like that.
Oh,
right? And me and
shit.
Campbell, like, went straight to the back and were hugging each other, just going, oh! Like, and she's going, you can't. Right? And then we had this private jet and we had a sound guy, Arnie, who was terrified of flying.
Yeah.
Right? And he was fine on bigger planes. And he'd been going through this like kind of hypnotherapy to get like kind of comfortable with flying, but it clearly wasn't going well.
Undo all the hard work.
Mate. Like he's like they had to restrain him, and he's like shouting, and he's like, "Land the fucking gun, land the gun, just fucking land it, man!" Right, and it's like that's going on, and there's people taking selfies, going, "Hey, I'm on a private plane." And it's just like, oh mate, I thought it was all going to
The
be
range of
fucking
emotion,
yeah. Like, and I'm just there going, oh, this is the fucking worst.
Oh, shit.
But yeah, we had some. So
That's
basically,
insane,
the buses and the trucks were reliable and friendly, right? Anything else outside of that comfort zone always went wrong. Always went wrong.
Lemmy was really a creature of habit, whether that was
100%.
from what I understand,
totally right.
whether it was his known spot was the apartment. It feels like when he wasn't in the apartment, the bus became the apartment. Like he just needed a spot to be alone. It's
totally.
what I understand.
It's you know, like I always tell people, I wait for Ian Kilmister.
Yeah.
Right? He's a very, very different person to Lemmy from Motörhead.
Yeah.
Very, very different person, right? Like, as much as he's the only musician I've ever worked with whose everyday clothes are his stage clothes, right?
Yeah.
That's a very different thing. Like, most bands are like, hey, you know, especially like metal bands, they're like, oh, you know, they'll walk in with jeans and a t-shirt and they're like, right, where's my spandex?
Yeah.
Right?
Danny Filth doesn't sit on the lounge wearing fucking spikes
exactly.
and shit.
Yeah, Lemmy did, right?
Yeah.
The only way you knew he was casual, he was he'd take his shirt off.
Yeah. The Daisy Dukes, man, that story about who was it? I think
Scott Ian, I think was
Scott Ian. Spoke that story on the thing.
Yeah,
that was good.
He used to make some like and it's the people go, you can't talk about it, but he did make some pretty fucking bad fashion choices. I remember him walking up and he's like, I've got these new glasses. I'm like, fucking hell, you got cataracts fixed or something? Like they were like these fucking like I'm like, man, what's going on?
There's a shout out to Ray Charles, just
an
homage.
That's why he was it's the white stick, man. Like,
he's in the remake of Blues Brothers or something, the piano scene. I don't know.
Totally,
Imagine that Lemmy on the piano playing blues with the fucking
with
big
these
glasses on.
Fucking glasses. There is a couple of pictures kicking about with him on man, but it's like,
that's
fuck,
good, man.
But yeah, he was definitely a creature of habit, right?
Yeah.
And he was very like insular, in the way that that he had his very small circle that he trusted implicitly, right? And then he, and I'm sure back in the day, like before my time working with them, he was a fucking like hellraiser and all of these things that he was well known for, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that wasn't so much raising hell; it was having a good time, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think, but by the time I met him, he was, an avid reader. Loved history.
Yep.
Like very you could have a really good fucking conversation with him about anything like I remember chatting with him for fucking hours about steam locomotives. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're just chatting about steam locomotives and like really knowledgeable on lots of topics, right?
Yeah.
And like I, without going too fucking deep or fluffy or whatever, is like I encountered Lemmy at a time in my life where I was kind of a fucking mess, and I learned a lot from him. Right, on how to conduct yourself, like how to be respectful, how to a lot of these lessons actually came to the surface after I'd finished working with him and I'd sorted myself out. But like, he knew when to be Lemmy from Motörhead, right? And I could we got to the point of working so closely, I could tell from a look in his eyes or a raise of his eyebrow who I was dealing with. Right? And so an example is when we were filming for that Lemmy movie. When Metallica were around, he's Lemmy from Motörhead.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? We get back to the bus that night, and it's Ian Kilmister.
Yeah, different.
Yeah. So there's times where he pulled that little bit of ego, and I'm not saying that he didn't thrive on being that ego sometimes. Do you know what I mean? He used to have a saying, "It's good to be king," right?
Yeah.
Like, and because for him, it's like,
good to be God.
he's like, I'm king of the fucking castle here, right? Do you know what I mean?
Well,
like,
he's God in most people's
totally,
minds.
right?
Lemmy is God. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was good mates with Phil Lynott, and Phil Lynott was apparently a lot like that too, wasn't he? Like, you'd go around to his, people would say you go around to his house at 3 a.m. and he opens the door like he's just walked off stage, and that was just...
It was just him, right? It was just his personality.
That's how he rolled. And you could see how those two got on so well.
Totally. Yeah. One of the first people I actually met when I was first working for Motörhead was Phil Lynnott's mum.
Yeah, right.
She used to come to every Motörhead show in Dublin and stuff, and I didn't realise she ran like a guest house apparently. Yeah, so that's where all the touring bands used to come and stay. So they're all what was really. I think her name was Philomena Lynott.
Yeah,
right. And she had this little guest house where she'd come. All the bands would stay over, and she used to come to all these different shows. And like really lovely woman, absolutely lovely woman. And that's what I mean. It's like there's this Lemmy from Motörhead who has this this rock and roll spit and sawdust right. And then there's this Ian Kilmister who likes invites one of his best friend's mums to gigs, and they hang out and they do it years after he's unfortunately passed away. And you know what he was there's this almost like either end of the spectrum kind of personalities, right? And then somewhere in the middle is where he's
I do have some specific questions people have written in. We'll keep it fairly brief just so that we can touch on them, because I know that I'll cop it if I don't just run through these 4. I know we've both got stuff. We all have things to get to later, and I could talk to you for hours, mate. This has been a really good episode so far. Like, it's been really good to get through some of the finer workings of it. But we'll run through a few of the formal questions, then... so that I don't get my balls dragged over the coals for not fucking asking them.
All right. Yeah, that's fine. Oh, yeah, all good.
Yeah. All right. So I've got one of 4. What's the longest time? Some of these are personal questions, like you may know. But yeah, what's the longest time that Lemmy spent playing video games on tour? You mentioned you liked to watch Family Guy. Did he play games while he was out as well?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. So we used to always have game systems on the bus. And also I used to bring a laptop with me where I used to have, I don't know if it still fucking exists, a thing called Meme. Yeah. So I had Meme on my laptop, and I used to have a couple of SNES controllers, and we used to play fucking Mario Kart non-stop. And so, I'm a staunch fucking Ghost Valley 3 crew, right? Let me both fucking Ghost Valley crew.
Nice,
right? And so we used to play
it's the most
that.
metal one.
Yeah, totally, right? And it's the opportunity to use the feather, right?
You
do the thing, so that is, and so, I used to play a lot of video games, but I guess the question is more around VLT video games.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, right? Most likely.
I've once spent some time in Vegas with him where he played for quite a few days fucking solid.
Yeah, right.
Like non-stop fucking solid. Like to the point where I pretty much had to fucking drag him out there by his cowboy hat.
Yeah.
Like, fucking come on, man. I'm going to win soon. I'm like, no, you
yeah, like playing the one-arm bandits and shit as well.
So we call them fruit machines.
Right?
The fruit is all, like, between me and him, we used to call him the electric mistress.
Yeah, right.
Like, you know what I mean?
You just can't lose as much money on the fruit machines.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, it's like, I'm just going to go take the electric mistress out on a date. Like that, right? You know? I'm going to see what she's got under her little fucking LED lit petticut.
Yeah, nice.
Which is normally fucking nothing. But like, so he used to do that quite a lot. And,
and
do you know what? It was, but pretty much every night we'd go. We were pretty, like you say, it was a creature of habit. So we'd do the gig. We'd then probably go to a strip club, and we'd end up at a casino.
Yeah.
Like, and it was always the fruit machines. Like, he never played, when I was with him, I never saw him play
cards or anything,
or roulette or any of this fucking.
Yeah, even he fucking hated the Ace of Spades by the end of it, probably. No, I'm just joking. But
weirdly, people used to ask him that question, do you fucking hate the Ace of Spades? He was like, do you know what? A lot of bands get stuck with terrible fucking one-hit wonders. Because at least we got a good one.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's what he used to say, right? Do you know what I mean?
I was trying to tie the card game to the song, but you know what I mean?
Fucking Tina Turner having to play Simply the Best every fucking night. Fuck me, right?
Imagine going into like a shopping centre and hearing your song, you can't escape it. You know what I mean? Like at least it's a bit like I'm a fan of ZZ Top, and there's not a song that you can do to death with any bands that I really like, you know, like I can still hear Ace of Spades, and the countless hours heard that song playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3, and it was on repeat in that game, like pretty much, and I still can hear it and go, yeah, that's good, and I like that. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't want to do that question to death because I've heard it before. Are you sick of your favorite song? And but yeah, that was there a song that you preferred? Like, did you have a favourite Motörhead song that you?
I've got two. Snaggletooth.
Yep.
One of my favourites. And I had it as my ringtone for a long fucking time. Like, and it's just a really good song. There's some good lines in it. You know, I'm gonna raise a roof. Speed don't kill, and I'm the proof. Fucking great lines.
Yeah. He was a great lyricist, Lemmy. With
totally right. And I think a lot of people missed out on bits of his humour in there, right? And are now picking it up in the new generation. But actually, that's quite funny, right? That's a good play on words.
Especially in another Perfect Day.
Yeah,
that album's so underrated. If you listen, I reckon he did his best lyrical work on that. And I often wonder if that was because of the Thin Lizzy connection with Brian Robinson coming in, and they held Phil and him held Thin Lizzy in such high regard. I just felt like they both really lifted their game.
Totally, you're absolutely right.
And the humour in Back at the Funny Farm, just the one-liners in that are just brilliant. Just so well
exactly.
crafted, so.
Like some of his little kind of plays.
If you want to get a beautiful girl, you're gonna have to use a MasterCard.
It's so good.
Such a fucking good. But I've got another one here.
Sorry, just really quick. My favourite song of all time is like quite predictable, but it's Overkill. And I fucking love it on so many reasons, right? Firstly, it's just one of the best fucking kind of punky metal songs ever written. Right? Just that the bass sound, all of that. But it was also the last song of the set every single gig that I ever worked for Motörhead. So it's what they would close with. And so it was almost that. And mate, even just talking about that, I felt my shoulders go, right? Because it's the end of the night. It's the end of the stressful part of a night, right? And so as that ends, there was that huge cacophony of noise that Hobbsy always used to do, and we'd be walking back to the dressing room, and it was like, all right, cool, let's do some fun shit now. The job's done. The important tick the boxes have been done. So
the bills are paid.
Exactly.
And it's just,
again, you've summed up my fucking 3-minute ramblings in one line.
That's good, man. I'm a translator between you and the guest.
Totally
That's the host's job, isn't it?
Love it.
Okay, welcome back. We've got another couple of questions. Thanks for listening so far. I've had heaps of fun with this one, and I hope everyone out there is having as much fun listening as I'm doing. There it is. Just keep you on your fucking toes. I could straighten that up for prosperity.
Gaff, mate.
I tell you what's fun. I wish I could say that's going to piss off the person editing this podcast, but I'm the geezer that does it. All I'm saying is that's going to piss me off in the future.
Totally right.
G'day, me from the future having to edit with this fucker. But anyway, we got a couple more questions. So, in his prime, how many bottles of Jack did Lemmy go through a night? Now, that was the original question. I want to reiterate that. During your time with Lem, what's the most you've seen him consume in one night? Or what was he? Let's start with what his standard was, and was there ever a time that he went over that? And I remember Ozzy Osbourne in the documentary said, "I never seen Lem incapacitated from anything."
Yep, same. I've never seen him drunk.
Yeah,
I've seen him when he'd done a bit too much speed. And you could always and little kind of thing. You can always tell if he's on stage and he's got chewing gum. That's when he feels he's done a bit too much speed, because he's trying to stop his jaw going. But in terms of Jack, would be catering used to put in there one of the big bottles every day. And he'd go through that. But he also had we had a flight case, or I say Richie the caterer used to have a flight case that was full of Jack Daniels and full of Marlboro Red cigarettes.
Right,
And so there was never a time...
Like in Leaving Las Vegas, where he opens the suitcase and all the bottles fall out.
Well, imagine that suitcase scaled up to being about a couple of fucking meters long.
Holy shit, right?
So it'd have Strongbow cider in it. Basically, it was a fucking party wagon, that thing. Right? But so he used to go through one of those, but he'd always he'd make one, and it sounds a weird way of saying it, but he'd make one drink that would last him the whole day because he'd be constantly adding ice to it and constantly like topping it up, and he'd slowly be going through it. Right?
Nice.
There you go, it's only having one a day.
Yeah, it's only having one a day, right? And it's almost like, I don't know if you've ever seen, there was an old British comedy called Only Fools and Horses, where he's talking about his brush, and he's like, yeah, I've had this brush for 25 years. It's only had like fucking 10 new heads, and it's had fucking 25 new shafts.
Yeah.
And he's like, but it's lasted me so long.
It's the same.
Right, and it's the same guy. And that's the mindset he had. He's like, it's only one drink. Right? But he keep topping it up, right?
It's like when we bought when Dad bought the family home and he renovated it.
Yeah.
He says, the bank can't foreclose on it because the house that they own's gone off in a skip bin. They've replaced everything.
Exactly that,
This is all my shit now.
Yeah.
Yours has gone to the tip.
Yeah, exactly, right? So probably, I think they're like 1.5 litre ones, or maybe 2.5 litre ones, the big ones. Like the ones that are big enough to have the label upside down because they should be in an optic.
You'd have one of those a day.
Yeah. But that would also be tapped up by me popping in and going, fucking hell, mate, I need a drink. And he'd be like, yeah, here you go. Or Butcher coming in and going, I need a drink. Or, you know, somebody visiting him, that'd be topped up. But then we'd get back to the bus and there'd also be one stored on the bus, right?
Yeah, okay.
And then there'd be drinks that we'd have going out. So I guess he used to drink a fucking lot, right?
Yeah.
And he was hard to keep. It took me a few tours to fucking get up to speed, right?
Yeah.
Because he used to, up to speed is a terrible pun.
Yeah.
But like he'd wake me up officially my job would be to wake him up, right? But a lot of the times if he'd been up all night, he'd wake me up, right? And he'd come up and he'd be like, boy. I'm like, yeah, what's up, then? And he'd be like, you awake? I'm like, well, I fucking am now, aren't I?
Yeah.
Right? And he'd be like, and he'd have a strong drink and a fucking lit cigarette. And he'd go, there you go. And then that's when the drinking would start.
Yeah,
and it would be non-stop. And any time I'd go into his dressing room to be like, there's some press coming up, but he'd be like, stay around for a drink, right? And you could never argue anything with him because you'd be like, I'm really fucking busy, Lem. I've got to fucking go and do all this. And he'd be like, who do you think runs this show? And he'd be like, yeah, you. And he'd be like, well, sit down and have a drink then. And so, and then you'd have to deal with the knock-on effects of that. But you'd be like, you know what, you're right, mate. Let's just have a fucking drink. At the end of the day, like, we're all doing this because it's real job avoidance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, we're doing this because none of us want to be fucking plumbers. Let's face it, right? Like, so it's, there was
I can't picture Lemmy rocking up being like, all right, so what am I here for? To like fucking replace the taps in your kitchen or
Do you know what? His first ever job was in a washing machine factory.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he used to say it a lot, right? So we'd be like, I remember, we'd be out drinking and people, it was always the place that people would come up and be like, I'll buy you a drink, I'll put your drink behind the bar. And so after being there for a little while, he'd be surrounded by these fucking free drinks. And for him, it was mutually beneficial. Not only did he have enough free drinks for him, but he could give free drinks to girls as they went by, right?
Yeah.
And so, and he says to me, he'd lean over and go, it's far better than working in a fucking washing machine factory.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
It's his catchphrase, yeah.
Yeah.
When they finally put out that fucking doll, they'll pull the string on the back and that's what it'll say.
Yeah, totally right. So a lot of drink.
Yeah, a lot. Now, we did cover a lot of the tour stories, so that one's all good. I'm happy. I think that whoever wanted to know the tour stories has a plethora of shit to listen to for that. And then also, you mentioned about Lem's generosity and how much he was willing to give stuff away. You just spoke about drinks and that. What's the most generous story that you ever heard from tour with Lemmy giving something away?
I think there was probably about a 10-year period where he paid for probably every pair of fake tits in Los Angeles.
Really?
So girls would come up to him at the rainbow, let me, I just want to do this and this and this, but I'm just so flat-chested. And he'd be like, yeah, there you go. Just let me see him first when you get back, but yeah, there you go. And so,
what a unit.
There you go, right? And so there was a period where he used to do that, but he was just generally he was super generous in the way that but not just generous financially as well, right? Generous with advice and generous with fucking, care, which to me is a huge currency, right? He was never one where his door was never. It sounds weird to say his door was always fucking closed, but his door was never closed if you knocked on it, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
If you needed him, he'd help.
Yeah. So he was very generous in the way that you could go in there and vent to him in a way that he wouldn't speak to you as being like, actually, well, this is my ship that I'm running. He'd speak to you as a mate. He'd be like, fucking hell, you have a drink, and he'd sort you out in ways that's do you know what I mean? If a mate saw that you'd had a fucking bust up with your girlfriend, you'd chat to them, they wouldn't necessarily be like, right, cool, well, let's go out on the fucking pool then. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
they'd be like,
Yeah.
oh, well, you know, like, you can vent to me. He was like that. And then, but I guess monetarily, which I'm guessing is what that question's about, he'd buy, like, guitars for people a lot of the time. Like, he'd buy, like I said, a lot of tits. He'd pay for, you know what? He'd pay for me, like, out of his own pocket to stay in LA with him
Yeah.
a lot, because he'd say, oh, I need you here for this. A prime example would be the Headcat tours. So I'd work for him for Headcat as well.
Yeah.
Which Motörhead doesn't pay for. Like,
Yeah.
you know, there's no reason why that should be coming out of Campbell's pocket or Mickey
Sure.
D's pocket.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And so he'd be like, oh, you know, I've booked you into this fucking hotel. You come and help me. And he'd pay me out of his own pocket to come and help him on the Headcat tours. Right?
Yeah.
Which was some of my favourite fucking tours, right? Because it was doing tiny venues.
Yeah, well,
And
that would have been great for him to
Yeah,
go
he
back to
loved
that
it.
level.
He
you know?
absolutely loved it, right? There was no fucking stress. Like, for me, it was quite stressful because obviously, like, unintentionally, he's got that standard of crew delivery.
Yeah.
But there's just me, right? Like, this, you know, my
Yeah,
crew
yeah.
was huge, right? And they're all seasoned fucking veterans,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah.
then there's just me, like, and I'm
Yeah.
having to change bass strings while so it was quite stressful.
Sure, yeah,
And
yeah.
it was, you know, part of the catalyst of where I eventually went, you know, I'm kind of done with this. But like, he absolutely loved those shows because the ability to be, you know, playing his bass here and fans where you're
Right
sitting
there.
now was incredible,
Yeah.
right? And you know, there was times where he just literally came off stage like, that's one of my fucking favourite gigs I've done in years. You know, and he was playing with, you know, Slim Jim and Danny B. Harvey and stuff, which he loved as well. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, so I want to close on something I wrote as a sort of like a closing question / point that I wanted to say.
yeah,
I recently rewatched the Lemmy doco. You're in it, or it's a movie, the Lemmy movie. And at the very end, you said something. The question must have been along the lines of like, you know, how do you think Lemmy would like people to remember him? Something along those lines. And you were like, look, I don't think he wants people to be sad. I think he'd prefer it more to be more of a party. And this is like in 2011. Now, Lemmy passes away in 2015. Was it that? Was it what you wanted it to be?
For me personally?
What you think he would have liked, you know, as a celebration of him? Or how
do you mean for me personally, or as in the wider response?
for yourself personally?
For me, it was a weird fucking day. It was a weird fucking day. Like, I was originally contacted by Witchskull, the guy who did the movie.
Yeah.
And he was like, look, I don't know if this has broken your side yet, but, you know, Lem's passed away, And I chatted with him, I was like, all right, cool. And then, you know, and well-meaning people, and I'll fucking double underline that, well-meaning people, like, who I knew as friends, would try and almost latch onto that a little bit.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's their link to that celebrity death.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, I was like, I ended up turning off Facebook for a little while, turning off Instagram for a little while, because
Sure.
I was just getting ping, and it's like, oh, I want to be personally linked to this. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
you know, and maybe that's me completely fucking misinterpreting it.
Yeah.
And it was all well wishes, right?
Yeah.
But it was all like, what do you think about this? What And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm actually sad because one of my friends has passed away.
Sure.
I'm not sad because
Yeah,
a
yeah.
musical idol's passed away, right?
Yeah.
And for me, you know, he'd had a hard couple of years, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I have my own personal opinions on that, but like, I think generally I went to the pub is one thing
Yeah.
that I did on the day I died. I went
Yeah.
to the Stanley Arms in Norwich and I just drank a fucking Jack and Coke on my own and was
Yeah.
like, fucking, there you go, gaffer.
I think Jack Daniel's sales went up like real heavy on that day.
Yeah,
must have.
We're still at the bar, so I work at a bar in Belconnen. It's a metal bar. It's called The Basement. They do other gigs there, but it's primarily metal.
Yep.
And we still make Jack and Cokes under the name Lemmy.
Yeah, nice.
So,
Yeah.
like, if someone comes up and orders a Lemmy, that's one of the first things we'll teach bartenders if they don't normally work in pubs that have metalheads working there.
Yeah.
You need to know what that drink is. We don't do cocktails. We don't fuck around. We don't put umbrellas in drinks or anything.
Yeah.
But if someone asks for a Lemmy, you got to know what to get them because that's your most common mixed drink that you're going to pour there.
Yeah, so when we used to make them on the road, it was 3 fingers of Jack, 2 fingers of Coke,
Yeah, right.
right? And then a shit ton of ice.
That's a proper Lemmy from
Yeah, and within the crew, it's known as a schwally, randomly. Well, I fancy schwally, yeah, all right. And I think that came from Butcher. I don't know the history of it, but that's what it was known as.
Yeah, but that's good to go full circle, man. It's good to get like the follow up sentence from that original interview that was part of that doco, and a lot of people that are going to be watching this have probably seen that movie. And yeah, it's good to get you back on and have that chat,
you're
man.
welcome, man. Yeah,
I know it's hard to talk.
And it was at the time. It was like for that interview. I think like I remember thinking it was a weird question at the time. Like, and it almost didn't compute. I remember like I think it was Greg who asked me, and I'm almost like, well, that's never gonna fucking happen.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, and do you know what? Fucking kudos to them to asking those questions. Right?
Yeah.
They had the foresight to do that. Like, and,
Yeah.
You know, and so yeah, isn't it an interesting question? But yeah, like looking back, that was a mad time.
It's hard to talk about anything, you know, that isn't just happy times, but it's always good to remember that, you know, that's how everyone wants to remember Lemmy, is like the what he did for the scene and what he did for everybody around him and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And I think people like yourself chatting about stories and stuff help spread that totally. Good
like,
news.
Some of my favourite stories about him are from people in bands who, like, you know, they went on and they made it, but they say stuff like, oh, do you know what, we were playing this festival and we were like first on, and you know, I saw Lemmy playing pool, and so I went up and chatted to him. I ended up fucking playing pool with him for 3 hours and chatting about music. And he was just that sort of dude, right?
Yeah.
He didn't give it like, and most of it was through pure, not ignorance, but pure fucking. He didn't know what a lot of the music scene was doing most of the time, right? Yeah. So you were either a fucking nice person or you weren't. And if you were a nice person, you got. He would open himself up to you, and he would fucking all of those things, right? And I think that's what he'd want to be remembered for more than anything, right? Is just being somebody who was fucking receptive to genuine, nice human beings. Right? Yeah. Because he had that really good fucking bullshit radar.
Yeah.
And you could tell, like, you know, there was bands like the Jim Jones Review, met him for the first time. I think they ended up going out and supporting Motörhead at some point, but like first time he met them, he was just fucking blown out with them all night, you know, just fucking chatting out and just like because they clicked. They had a common bond, which is a love of music. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, man. We'll wrap it with that, man. Thank you very much for taking the time and having a chat.
I'm more than welcome.
And you've got we mentioned before, you've got some clips on YouTube I've seen under God's PA. That's the channel, and also you've got a book coming out talking about your time.
So the book, we've actually changed the title. It's not called God's PA anymore, so it's called Wasted Opportunities.
Okay,
which I kind of liked a bit more because not only did I waste many opportunities on tour, but there were opportunities to get wasted. And so we've kind of widened that out, and that's coming out on Fracture Originals later this year, which is we're just finishing up now. It's an exciting point where all the illustrators are working on it. So
perfect. Yeah, thank you very much for being on the show. Thank you for co-hosting with me, Joel.
Excellent. That was really good. Cheers, man.
Yep, good stuff. And also, I have one date to plug for this. We're actually doing a Metalhead trivia night on the 15th of April. So just for anyone listening that wants to come out and try their knowledge on Metalhead stuff, I'm sure there'll be some Lemmy questions in there. So we'll see if anyone can do that. So that's it. That's the only event I've got coming up, and thank you everyone for listening. I appreciate it. It's been a little while since we put out them more sporadically now, and this has been the best time to put out another episode. So cheers for coming on, and cheers everyone for listening. Thank you.
Cheers.
Sweet.